So good morning, everybody, or good afternoon if you're on the East Coast, probably pretty close to lunchtime for you. Welcome to our Succession webinar, Fall 2021 update. My name is Eben Louw, and with me is Kelly Boxma, and she's a senior manager in our South Surrey office. Good morning, Kelly. And so just a quick rundown through our agenda today. We're going to start off with an update around succession. So we have canvassed quite a few of our peers throughout the firm, clients we've worked with, a number of questions that came through the registration links when you registered. And I think it's worthwhile to capture some of that and say what has happened in the last, which would be unprecedented, probably 2 years of our business and family business lives. We're going to look through some of the common approaches that can be considered. And quite a few people said, what we want to know is which approach is going to work for us. And we'll talk about that specifically. We're then going to focus on the elements of good succession so that there is a clear understanding of what those elements are. We'll take some questions from the audience towards the end, and then we will conclude in about an hour's time. Now, just so that you know, this whole webinar is recorded, so you will receive a link to the recording within the next few days once our digital team has transformed it, and so that link will be sent out to you, so you will have access to it. You will also have the contact details for myself and Kelly in the emails. It is also in the registration. If you want to reach out to us afterwards via email, feel free to do so. And we can certainly get back to you. And if it is not us, we'll connect you with the right M&P person. So as I said, the presenters today is myself. I'm a partner in the Abbotsford office of M&P, and I work with family businesses, business families, wear a number of hats, including family office, as well as succession. And I'm working, as of last night, for example, working with business families going through the transitions and everything that entails. With me is Kelly. She's a senior manager, as I said, in our South Surrey office, and she has a focus on succession in her practice. And so it's great to have her on the call as well. If you feel you want to ask any questions during the presentation, there is a chat function or a question and answer function. Please feel free to do so. If we're not able to get through it all during the presentation, we typically run out of time towards the end. But if that is the case, please leave your name, tell us where we can reach you, and we'd be happy to respond to any specific questions that you may have. So what happened in the last 2 years? Well, at some point they thought the world will end. Then they said, well, the world did not end, but the rules changed. Many of the rules changed over the last 24 months. So people thought that with COVID, things were shut down, and then it opened up again, and then it picked up speed. It became a matter of hot or cold. Businesses are booming or they're struggling, and we saw a huge erosion of the middle ground. So it really became you're winning or you're losing out of COVID. Some businesses thought that they were shutting down. I remember, what was it, about March 8th last year, a strategic plan with a client. How do we deal with 25% growth? That was the big question they had. 2 weeks later, it is, how do we save our business? About 2 months later, they had more than 25% growth. So it is hot and cold, and it all happened, and it happened fast. There have been quite a few industry-specific consequences. Construction is still booming across most of Canada, with deep impacts on the retention of key staff. Retail and manufacturing, a lot of the retail and manufacturing clients are struggling. There is a new normal, so there is a new way that has to be found. Many people were forced to go onto Amazon and other online purchase platforms. Are they coming back? So we see that in malls, we see that in a lot of places, things have changed. So we see some businesses struggle to keep up, or just struggling to survive. Some of the government funding programs have been running out or it has been reduced. Some businesses needed to qualify, they did not, so it had a huge impact on businesses and eventually succession. We find that business families have been doing far more introspection about their own plans. It was like a look in the mirror moment. It was enough of the rules changed out there for people to say, you know what about us? Bottom line, most of the rules changed and people struggle to make sense of this new reality. This is what we are dealing with. We're in uncharted waters at the moment. So what do we see more of? We see more business families emphasize philanthropy than we see before. It is interesting, in a time that most people wanted, you would imagine they're holding back. They're actually saying, no, we want to give out more. Some families are struggling to manage the significant wealth that has been built up well. So we see a lot of the struggles to say, we sold our business, we went through succession, or we transitioned it. How do we manage this? Families are looking for more options to hold their business interests long term. We want to keep this in the family. Discussion last night with a client, everybody in the company, and it's a large company, everybody in the company is considered like an extended family member. So they want to hold on to some of the businesses. Quite a few business owners have been approached by potential and quite aggressive buyers that want to move quickly, that want to buy businesses. There is still a lot of liquidity out there. So if you're saying, I'm on this webinar because I want to sell my business at some point, for the right businesses, there is a lot of liquidity and people that want to buy good businesses. We see a big emphasis change to work-life balance. And it has got an impact on succession as well, not just people working from home and the home office that has become more prominent, but also in families where some of the next generation, or as we abbreviated next gen, the next gen family members are saying, we also want work-life balance. The ownership participation by employees is becoming a bigger thing to help with retention and even to help with succession. And a lot of the rules that changed actually shook loose some of the moving parts and opened up new possibilities. So the war for talent, it is raging out there. We get phone calls daily from people saying, I need to keep my best people. I need a way to retain them. I need a way to reward them. Otherwise, they're going to end up with a competition. So there are lots of deals for good businesses. There is an appetite in the market to purchase good companies. So that is good news, caveat being good companies in specific industries. Kelly, can you take us through some of the common plans to consider?
Of course, thanks, Eben. So there's really 4 basic options to consider. There's the selling the business or part of it, passing it on to the next generation, family continuing to own the business, or a combination of the above, a hybrid option. The implications of each selected approach can be built with these 3 options. Each option will look different based on each family and each business, and each option will require different levels of planning and structure.
So let's look at some of the elements of good succession. Kelly explained to us there are only 3 routes really, or a combination that can be taken. I'm selling the business, I'm going to keep the business long-term, or I'm transitioning it to the next generation, I'm going to transition it to maybe employees, a management buyout, or it's going to be a combination of that. So it sounds very simple. But then we have to start implementing it and look at it. We say, okay, so what are the elements of good succession? So let's set the stage. We are talking here about succession in its full extent, because this is where clients have most questions. If you're on this webinar now and you're saying, how do I just get as much money for my business if I sell it? Then we are, just keep in mind, we're talking about the bigger picture. That is one component of it, and it's a very important component. But that would be a very specific focus. We'd be happy to talk about it, but our conversation today is about the broader picture for family business and business families. This is also where most people get stuck, is to look at these elements of good succession. And if you don't properly look at it early on in the process, there are more layers of decision making and change required than is initially assumed. We just wrapped up a few transactions with clients that sold their businesses. And if you ask them 3 months before the closing deadline, if they're prepared for the complexity, they would not have foreseen the number of emails and the complexity that went into selling the businesses. So there are far more decisions that span into the family and the employees and a whole bunch of places that at the outset, it sounds, I don't really know if we need to do that much. The answer is typically yes, you do. So a guide is required to help you develop that plan, and it may require different guides with different skill sets. I put a little bit of a tongue-in-the-cheek comment in there. Accountants are not professionally trained therapists. However, there are many, many days in succession work and working with family businesses and business families where I do not touch accounting and tax, because we are dealing with relationship issues. We are dealing with family issues and helping them, because succession in its broad scope is actually pushing some of these conversations and issues forward. So what you need is one overarching integrated plan. And when you're saying, what does that look like? We're going to take you through some of the questions that need to be considered when you do that. So let's start with the 3-circle model. You may have seen this before. It focuses on 3 circles and how they overlap: the family, business, and ownership. Each of these 3 circles have different roles, and you'll see there are certain overlaps in them. And so it's a model that has been used quite a bit. It's quite popular, but as with many things, Harvard Business School likes to bring everything down into a simple grid, with 4 squares and say, here is the summary. It's the application thereof that is sometimes so complex, no different than with this 3-circle model. In a nutshell, any strategic plan, whether it is succession plan, any business plan, any plan for the family, comes down to a few simple things. It's about people, what they do together, how their affairs are structured, and how that changes over time. That's it. Again, the complexity is when you actually start to apply it. So we want to unravel some of that complexity for you today. So to do all of that, you need a plan. The stakes are just too high to approach this important life event, which may be a one-off event. So you have to get it right the first time and the only time. You cannot do it without an overarching plan. So what we want to do is we want to take these moving parts, people, what they do together, how that is structured, and how all of that changes. And we can apply it to the 3-circle model for you today. Keep in mind what I said earlier. This will be available as a recording for you afterwards if you want to go back. So we're going to do a fly through the areas where we see most family businesses struggle. That is our focus. And so if you are going on this journey and you're thinking about succession, our job today, the way we see it, is to ask good questions so that you think about it. We can drown you in questions and process and structure and all of that. It's not what we want to do. We want to give you some pointers because some of the questions will actually resonate with your specific situation. So circle number 1, the family. It's about people. So when you do succession planning, you need to get really clear, really early in the process, who the people are that you are considering under that umbrella term family. For example, is it just your own children in a family business world, or would it also be the in-laws? Who needs to be part of the decision? Who needs to be part of the process? Who needs to be brought into the decision-making as certain things are taking part? You need to know who the people are. You need to look at their skills. There are a lot of things to look at. And an important one, are there family secrets to consider when planning? We see this more and more. We've done interviews through our process. sometimes the whole family, and then you are not able to hear from anyone that there's actually a big secret that will change all the succession planning. It is happening far more than we would like to see it, unfortunately, but we need to know about these things, so keep that in mind. What does the family do? Is the family's role as a whole to guide, direct, and protect the overall wealth of the family? Or is it to sell mom and dad's business for a lot of money, inherit money one day, and everybody go their own way? So what the family does and what they want to do, for example, do they want to start a private family foundation to do philanthropic work? You see people like Jeff Bezos doing this. You see Bill Gates doing it. You see a lot of the business owners out there that have done well do it. We're actually seeing far more of our local clients do this as well. So what does the family actually do? And who will help to make succession successful and who can actually sabotage it? It's useful to know that early on. How is the family structured? Who will make the key decisions? And how should the family as a whole and all the family members own assets together? For example, if the business is retained and you transition it to the next generation, let's say one of the children become the CEO, will that person also need to own that operating entity, or do they own property entities that may be there? So there are a lot of considerations around structure that is important. Then the big one, how will that change over time? Many people, and we saw that through COVID, uncertainty and change, and the uncertainty about change caused enormous hardship for people, and because it is just unclear. I can tell you as a husband and as a father, we were evacuated 2 Sundays ago with a few of our neighbors because of a mudslide. The uncertainty is big. We had no damage. We just have uncertainty because people ask me, when can you go back? I say days, weeks, months, no idea. But we have people in BC, we're located in Abbotsford, that had enormous damage. Now, just imagine the change that was forced upon them and what the impact will be. Next circle is ownership. Again, it's about people. Should you have, for example, non-family members like key employees be part of the discussions from an ownership lens? What are the retirement plans of the owners? How much retirement capital does the owners need? If they need lots and they need to extract it from the business, it will put a financial burden on the business. What do the owners actually do? What role do they want? Do they want the ability to guide the company, to lead the company, or just sit back and enjoy the rewards of the company and maybe do it through an advisory board or a family board or a family council? You need clarity on that. Big one, how will compensation be structured and what role will that compensation be structured around? Is it somebody with a hands-on role, or is it just as somebody that is through the family interest and investor? How are they structured? How do you protect the business against owner conflicts? For those of you following the news, it was really hard to miss the Rogers family and all the drama they went through and how public all that drama was in the last few weeks. Well, how do you protect the business against conflicts that happened at the owner level if you hold on to the business and a non-family member or even a family member is now leading the business? Who should own what parts of the business and who should have legal and operational control? Control is a recurring theme where people are scared because they think it is an all or a nothing. Again, how will that change over time? How will the ownership control change? It is not an all or nothing. It is not black and white. You don't have to own and control all of it and go to I own and control nothing of it. You can find the right balance for you and your family in the process. How will a buyout of the first generation be financed? And in some businesses we work with, it's the second and third generation with the wealth that has been built up. Can new owners be introduced? If so, how and when? So let's focus on the third circle, which is about the business itself. It is about the people. So does the business have the right people to lead and grow the business? Whether they be key employees, whether they be family members, are the right people in charge of the business? Is the business able to hire and retain the best talent? Is the family member participation required in the business? Yes or no? How well can the family actually lead the business? Are they equipped to do it? We have many situations where we had founders of businesses. They started in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, even later, and they've been enormously successful. But none of their children are really into business. And so what do? If the founder cannot be replaced by a family member and you say, well, does it mean I have to sell the business? Possibly. But maybe you hold on to it, but you develop a governance model where the right people are involved and you bring advisors in, let's say through an advisory board, that can help guide and direct the next generation, or even if the next generation is in the business, to be sage words of wisdom as they lead the business. What do? How can the value of the business be maximized for a future sale? If you're thinking that a business sale is the only option for you going forward, and you're saying, this is a key part of my retirement capital one day, this is going to be, I put all my money in here, I did not invest in RSPs, we hear that quite often. Everything is in the business, everything I own. Well, then the question to you is this: if your business is the most valuable asset that you have, how should you treat it? You should treat it as a really important investment. So if you treat it as a really important investment, what would you do? Maximize the value, maximize the growth. And then you will ask, if I want to sell my business, how much can I sell it for? Well, there are factors that would implicate how much you can sell it for. Who would the buyers be? And what is the best way to structure all of this and to start preparing my business so it is clean? And if any potential suitor comes and says, would you be interested in buying or in selling the business, you can turn around and say, you know what, yes, here's my plan, my business plan. This is what we've been following. We've got best practices in place, neat, tidy package. Every buyer wants to see that, especially the ones that say, we've got the capital, we want to buy a business, but we don't want to run that business full time. We need a good management team in place. So that is crucial for business owners to do. How should the business be structured? So should you start structuring the business? If EBITDA, earnings, would be the biggest deciding factor in what the business is worth, then you need to start making decisions to build and grow EBITDA. There is no sense in continuing to invest in the business when you know EBITDA will be the key factor and you're actually eroding your EBITDA, you're eroding your earnings with all the expenses. And then before you start to see the returns, you say, you know what, I think I've got a pretty good business. I want to sell it, and then you're disappointed with the sale price because the EBITDA, the track record, the earnings track record is just not there. If it is about access to key markets, whatever it is, that is what you need to start focusing on in your business. Long before you say, I'm ready to retire, I want to put my feet up and I want to go spend my winters somewhere where there's lots of sunshine. How will that change over time? So what is the life cycle of the business if those exiting, typically the founders, are no longer the ones driving performance and growth? If you are the key decision maker, you're the key relationship with key customers, you're the one driving and growing the business, well, you know what? How do you extricate yourself from that and start to involve others so that they can be part of that? What governance models will work best for guiding and directing the business interest? For example, do you need to put an advisory board in place or a board of directors? Who should be on there? If you are doing major expansion, let's say you're a Canadian company and you want to expand into the US, Would you not want to bring the advice in from somebody, let's say in a board, and they don't have to have voting rights? Bring them in for a year or two and say, help me, you've seen this before, you can act as a guide and you can direct us and help us to grow and expand our business into the US. So the governance models around this needs to be clear for guiding and directing the business. Bottom line, if you do this once only, then find a good guide which can help you develop a clear plan. There is no Google or cell phone reception if you climb Everest. You do not want to show up in front of Everest, which you climb once in your life. Succession, I'm selling my business. I'm a little bit scared because I've never done this before. Your very first time. Imagine you turn to the guide next to you and you say, have you done this before? He said, nah, not really. Don't have much experience with it. Tell you what, we'll just figure it out and we will do a Google search if we want to get some advice. It's too late. You need to walk back and say, by the time I get to this stage, next stage, I want to be prepared. I want to be the best version of my family business and business family for each of these milestones. You can decide it in advance and then you can start executing it. When Kelly and myself were preparing yesterday, we said, do you want to do this squished all into a short process with lots of anxiety where there is no room for mistakes and you have to get it right first time? Or do you want to stretch it out by having a series of conversations? I asked Kelly the question and she said, of course you want to do it stretched out, more conversations, lower anxiety levels. That's the best time to make some of these decisions.
Absolutely. That last quote really resonates with me, and I'm sure many of the attendees on this call today, comparing succession to climbing Mount Everest. So just know you're here on this call, you're in good company because there's a lot of people that are feeling that way. So during succession, there's a few discussion questions that come up all the time. Eben would probably agree 10 out of 10 times they come up. This next part of our discussion today is going to highlight some typical high-level questions and concerns we often hear, and likely questions most of the attendees on this call have today. When is the best time to start planning for succession? If you're here today, you've obviously already thought about it, and the time is now. Whether you want to sell to a family or transition, start now. It's never too early to start the discussion. The one issue that we see is when timing is not on our side. But an important thing to take away is just because you've started the discussion does not automatically mean that you have to go into executing your plan. The first step is simply the plan.
Absolutely. And, I have to tell people quite often, just because we're discussing certain elements of the plan, just because we're saying, what do you need to do, does not mean you leave this meeting and immediately you have to go and do it. This is something that holds a lot of people back from doing succession planning, saying, I don't have the time to do it right now. Why not just start with a series of conversations? That's all you have to do. A series of conversations, you start to identify some of the things to think about, to start planning for, and to position yourself and your whole team, including the family, to position them for.
Absolutely. That flows great into the next question. What are some of the common mistakes that we see when we are approaching succession planning? And in conjunction with the first one, the most common one would be not beginning or waiting, not starting the conversations early, not taking those small action steps to plan for success. Those small steps can lead to big results. And like Eben mentioned earlier, most people only go through succession once, so we want to do it right.
There is a lot that we can do here. One of the tools that I use, it's a strategic planning tool, is scenario plannings. For example, I want to keep my business. What are the pros and cons? I want to sell my business. What are the pros and cons? Or I want to have the next generation take care of it, but it needs to be hands-off. What are the pros and cons? And we go through these different layers, and you're starting to see the differences and the implications of it. You see, a lot of this succession is always about people. It sounds like it's about a business, and in many cases, how do I sell my business and what's the right tax plan? But it always revolves around people. Hence, the little people, the figure at the bottom of the slide there. So you need people to be ready so that when the step comes, they're showing up, they've got the right experience, they've considered the right questions, and they're ready to make some of the moves and to change into the next level of what is required from them, both for the family and for the business.
Absolutely. So when we're ready to sell, how do you maximize the value of the business to make sure you're selling it for the highest possible benefit?
We get this question quite often, hence it is on our slide deck here. You have to understand that your business, there are a lot of businesses out there, venture capital company, private equity firms that are buying companies, and they're buying good companies. There is huge consolidation in industries right now. And we see in a lot of industries that the middle ground, and I think that trend was already running, it was already going, but then COVID exacerbated it. It accelerated it. So we see the middle ground start to erode away. Small companies are left, and the bigger companies are being eaten up. They are being consolidated into other large consolidation players. And it is surprising because there are industries where you would think consolidation players in here, professional services firms with venture capital firms that are investing in them, private equity firms that are investing in them. So you have a lot of businesses where you're looking at it saying, I want to sell my business for as much money as I possibly can. And then you realize the only people that you can sell it to, in some cases, and we do a lot of that through our Smart Share program, is you can sell it to employees, key managers, or the whole employee force. There are various ways to do that, but there you may have a situation where people, because of their compensation level, which is fair, it's market level, they are not able to buy the business from the current owners. So now we're coming up with unique solutions to help bridge that gap, because you've got very valuable companies in some cases and management saying, we've got the skills, we've got the energy, we've got the drive. Please give us the opportunity to buy the company. And they just don't have the ability to finance that. So we're looking for ways then in which we can do it. We've come up with a few quite innovative ways. I do want to bring one principle forward here. If you own your business and you're saying, I need to sell it for whatever reasons, I need to sell this down the road and I want to sell it for the highest possible value. What is the most important thing you can do? Start thinking about your business not as the owner, but as the buyer. What would a buyer want to buy? If you have one key customer only, that's 80% of your revenue. That's great. You may serve them very well and you may think that they will never leave you. But a buyer coming in is going to say, well, that's a big risk. If I pay you X millions of dollars for the company and the customer leaves, what did I pay for? So you have to go through your whole business, and you can build this into strategic planning and say, I need to prepare my whole business as if somebody is going to buy it. And that is how I maximize the value. The funny thing is that when you do that, your business results while you own it will actually increase. Your processes will become more formal. Your systems will become much better. And I'm not talking technology systems. I'm talking process systems, manufacturing systems, your methodologies. You will start looking at things like, why would somebody want to buy my equipment, my customer list, the access I have geographically to certain markets. So you have to do a 180 and say, but if I'm a buyer, what would I want to buy from this business? Why would this appeal? If you we're in BC, so let's say you have the BC market locked down and a consolidator is coming in from Ontario, saying, we want a presence in BC. How will you position your company to be the best in your geography, whether it's a province, whether it's a region, whether it's a country? How do you have your brands to be structured and to be promoted in a way that it's so solid and that anybody would like to buy it? So that is one of the biggest gifts you can give yourself. Start approaching your business as if you're a buyer and not a seller down the road, and start putting those different parts in place. You will maximize the value. People want to buy a clean business, and when they ask questions, you would be in a better position to ask that.
And Eben, what are you seeing for timelines on that? When a business buyer is looking at a business to see the growth and the potential in it, are they looking at a 2-year comparative? Are they looking at a 5-year comparative?
It depends on the industry. Technology, they are very EBITDA focused, and it can be 1 or 2 or 3 years. It really depends on where the company has been and where they're going. It is, you do get buyers coming in saying, we want to see 3 years of audited financial statements.
Mm-hmm.
You get some of them that say, we want to see 2 years. Some of them working on one now where they said, we just want to see 1 year of audited financial statements. So the timeline is very deal specific, but it is really hard if somebody comes in and say, you know what, I'm a consolidator, I'm an investor, I've got the capital. That's not the problem. I'm looking at your business, but I'm also looking at 3, 4 other similar businesses, and I have to choose within the next 3 months who I want to buy. I want to issue an LOI, and I want to say, this is the one I want to go with. Who do you think will they go with? The one with a clear answer, the one that is the best prepared. So you don't want to arrive there and say, can we just have 3 months and we'll get all our ducks in a row and we'll structure it all and we'll have an answer ready? I have had clients say to me, we've got a really good business, we're valuable, we're doing well. Why would a buyer not want to pay X dollars for my business? And I'm saying, they've got other, better, cleaner options. It's that simple. So again, time is relative, but if somebody comes to you and they want to turn this around in short order, you need to be ready way before you actually get there. And again, you don't have to boil the ocean. You don't have to do all of it in one short time period, but build out the plan and say, how do I start to structure this and build this out so that we will be ready, and prioritize and say, these are the ones that we're actually starting with.
Absolutely. So once we're ready to sell, what's the most tax effective way to sell a business? And what are some of the tax implications I should be aware of? So without getting too technical, we kind of went through the 4 options at the beginning and hybrids of those options, of course. There are many ways to sell a business. And there are many tax implications in the way which you actually do sell the business. If you're considering selling a business within the next few years, you're going to want to conduct, as Eben mentioned earlier, a review of your business and things that could influence the sale, and specifically taxes resulting from that sale. If issues are found, then you'll have the time to take the actions now, such as reorganization or restructuring, to help you achieve the most optimal tax results in the future. The small changes taken now, forward-looking, can have big implications and significant results. When it comes to selling your business, the planning and foresight, my apologies, will help you achieve the goals that you're looking for.
And so, for example, let's just take something that we don't know if it's going to happen, but there are lots of rumors about changes in the capital gains inclusion rate. That will have a profound impact on what you're able to take from a transaction. It may be next week, it may be the week thereafter, it may be next year, it may be never. But these are the kinds of things that you have to make sure that your company is properly positioned for this. We've seen a few cases in the last year where a deal came out of nowhere. They were not actively pursuing a sale. And when it came, from a tax point of view, we wanted certain tax structures in place for a minimum of 2 years because of the tax rates and just the tax treatment and the tax rules. All of a sudden, somebody comes in and says, I want to issue an LOI. I want due diligence done, and I want this whole thing to close within 6 months. You do not have the ability to then get a 2-year preferential tax treatment. So again, you need to start looking at this early on. There is a joke when it comes to personal tax season. People get motivated by two things. One is the avoidance of immediate pain, or one is the gain of immediate pleasure and or reward. So if you look at it, and this is the joke, why people bring their taxes into us April 30th on the deadline day, the pain was not yet immediate, and that's why they didn't do it. I would caution anybody thinking of selling the business in the next 3, 5, 6, 7 years to start having these conversations now, and not to end up by saying, I will delay it until I am ready. When Kelly and myself, when we were talking through some of the content, and because we wanted the questions and the material today to reflect what we struggle with and what our clients are struggling through with succession, because then everybody can benefit from it that is on the score. And we talked about it. And one of the key things is just to start with a series of conversations. You do not show up at the airport with your passport and your credit card, stand there, look up at a board and say, I guess I'm flying to wherever for a 4-week vacation. That looks nice on that board. No, you do your research in advance. You may talk to people that have been there. You read up on wherever you're going to go. Well, this is multiples the size of the journey that you're embarking on. So again, step back. It doesn't have to cost you anything. It will just take you to have a low anxiety discussion with somebody at M&P and say, you know what, if I want to sell my business, how do I just calmly start the process so I can be as ready as I can be? What do I want to do? Or I need to transition it to the next generation, and we can start looking at it that way. So the tax implications earlier is better. A lot of people put this off and say, I'm not selling right now, not transitioning right now. I don't have the benefit immediately, so I'm going to put this off until a later date. That actually does come back, and it can bite people if they don't plan for it properly.
The decisions are going to have to be made regardless, but it's a matter of when you want to make those decisions. Correct. And how much time you're going to give yourself.
Correct.
Eben, do I have to give up all the control at once?
No. Short answer, no. It is not an all or nothing decision. If you want somebody in your family, or you want somebody in your management team to lead the business, to take over the role of daily operational control, why not start to give them more and more responsibilities? And you have a structure and a path. Let's say it's 1 year, let's say it's 2 years. You test the individual in advance, and you say, at certain points, certain control will transfer. This is something when it comes to bringing employees into ownership. Control and confidentiality is a stumbling block for many. When it comes to succession, control is a really big issue. I do not want to give up control. Good news, you don't have to. Not practically, not legally, you can hold on to it. The golden rule, him or her who has the gold can make all the rules. So if you are the majority owner of the business and of all the wealth, you are able to dictate the rules. So it's a good way to do it, is to start early and say, what does my change of control, my role and responsibilities for everybody, what does it look like? And how do I know that somebody is ready to take over the next level of control or responsibility? And how can I act as a safety net under them to just stay there? I just want to see, there's a question here. What do you recommend as a way to set up the transfer of ownership so the company can keep its credit limits with suppliers? Great question. It's not only the credit limits with suppliers, but for example, in many construction companies and project-based companies, there is bonding and personal guarantees that is provided. I tell you what, if I own the business, I control the business, I provide personal guarantees, and my family's equity and wealth is at stake, I want to have control. If I relinquish some day-to-day control, I want the safety mechanisms in place. So the way that you can do that is to make the transfer, Joshua, to your question, make the transfer of ownership a non-issue because you're planning all of this all the way through. Your suppliers may know about it, they may not know about it. It will not matter to them if the business is run well and you are able to say, you know what, just to let you know, I will not be the CEO 1 year from now. I'm starting to step back, but I have put the following mechanisms in place. So you guys are completely safe and everybody knows that you've introduced the right people to your suppliers, to the banks, to anybody that is relying on guarantees that you provide. They want to see a plan. That is what they're looking for. So I think, Joshua, I hope I'm answering your question, but that is a way that your transfer of ownership, it's two things you're transferring. One is control and the one is value. You can start to transfer the value, but you don't have to transfer all of the control that goes with it. So bottom line, it's not all or nothing. You can structure it over time. You can even leave all control with you until the very end, and then it transfers over. Legally, operationally, day to day, however you want to structure it, every situation is different. So Kelly, I have a question for you to what I just said. How do I ensure a smooth transition of roles and responsibilities?
The easiest way would go to a point, say, 3 years from now, when the transition's done, all the changes are done, and you're just left with the end results. This is what Stephen Covey calls begin with the end in mind. Take a moment and think of the advice you'd want to give yourself from that vantage point when you're starting the process today. With beginning with this end in mind, we can structure the key steps and develop the plans, small and big, tax plans, business plans, and financial plans. We look at what ones need to be executed and who will be doing that. This includes identifying, as Eben spoke of earlier, the key roles and responsibilities and a progress chart to actually map it out. Again, say 3 years from now. If you need a new CEO, it may take 2 or more years. You're going to need to know that you have not only the right person in place, but the right plan in place to have the smooth transitions of that role and responsibilities associated.
And Kelly, I think in some of the smaller companies, people have multiple roles and responsibilities. You don't have a large corporation with a large org chart where it is easier in many cases to do the transition because everybody's got such a defined role. So in smaller companies, absolutely, when people are wearing multiple hats, you can do it as well. You just need to know what questions to ask, and you need to know what the different layers of that would be, and then you need to develop a path by which you are able to ensure that transition, and you structure it out. You also can then decide if people are actually ready to take certain roles and responsibilities on. Many times, unfortunately, I've said to business families, I said, your kids came through a school system that said everybody is a winner. And so that mindset, you know, and just participation and everybody gets a medal. I've heard lots of sarcastic comments about that over the years. But you know what, then they come into a business environment and they think they can Google any question, and that is how they're going to, you know, just step into their role. Well, there's a lot to be said for gut feel, for experience. I keep saying to some of the more experienced business owners, you know what, never underestimate your gut feel, because it comes through years and years of experience of making mistakes and of doing more things right than doing things wrong, and for recovering from some of the silly decisions you made, but also seeing the benefit of having made some really big, bold, risky moves over the years. So there's a lot of transition that can happen. So what does that look like? Different for every business, different for every family, different for small, medium, or large businesses. But there is a lot that can happen when you do that if you plan it out properly.
Beginning with the end in mind.
Mm-hmm.
Eben, how do you make it fair within the family? Examples include certain children aren't interested, there's large age gaps, or there's differences in the priorities or motivations?
So first of all, it may be some good news. It may be bad news, but it is unlikely that you will have everybody happy with the decision in many situations. It is just the reality. You have to do what is the best for the family and the best for the business. And when you walk into a family meeting, for example, and you want to announce some of your plans, you need your ducks in a row. You need to say, I have decided that child so-and-so will be groomed to take over as the CEO. This is why. This is what we looked at. We looked at the skills, we looked at the attitudes, we looked at aptitudes, we looked at the ability to learn and grow within the industry. We looked at the willingness for the management team to accept that person as the CEO. This is why we've done it. So have your considerations structured and ready. Fair and equitable, it's not always the same thing. Fair and equal is definitely not the same thing. And so we find in a lot of cases, this holds people back from embarking on succession planning because they're saying, you know what, I know, this is a comment I heard a number of times, I know that child so-and-so is going to be really unhappy if we do this and if I don't give that child everything they want. Well, would you give an 18-year-old just finishing up high school or that just finished high school, or a 25 or a 30 or a 40-year-old that has got a life that is complex, it is complicated, lots of issues. Maybe it is substance abuse issues. Maybe it is relational issues. Maybe it is somebody that is going through a divorce. Why would you plan to transition a lot of the family's wealth over into that person, especially for the younger children of business owners? It can become really messy. So you need to be clear as to expectations, and you need to be clear so that you can walk in and say, this is what we considered, and this is our decision. That goes 90% of the way to say, you know what, not everybody may be happy, not everybody thinks they were treated fair, but to turn around and say, I did my best, and this is the best for the family, and this is the best for the business. We have a lot of expectation gaps. Let's say some children that worked in the business since they were, elementary school, especially on farms. Okay, so do they need to be compensated for all of that, or were they compensated fairly all the way after high school? Maybe they went to post-secondary education, they came back. If they were fairly compensated for the job all the way, do you still need to compensate them for sweat equity? Some cases, yes, some cases, no. But at least know to ask those questions. So fairness, you can just prepare in the best possible way. Understand that family remains family. Not everybody may be happy with it.
And I often see a spike in these types of conversations during this time of year with the holiday season approaching, leading up to it, preparing for these conversations or having these conversations over the holidays, and then January and February wanting to really get a hold of the plan and formalize those discussions.
Exactly.
So we're going to go ahead and take some questions from the audience and continue on with some of our key questions that Eben and I often hear during succession planning. I'll start with one. How long does it take to build a succession plan? The timing of succession plans vary based on the people involved, the planning and the implementation. A timeline, I'd say 3 months to anywhere from 2 to 3 years. But again, varies with what is actually happening within the family and business.
Okay, and I'll take a question. Where would something like a family council or a family board come in? If you are planning to manage family wealth or family business interests long-term, and you want to prepare your family, the next generation, and even the generation after that, to manage it well, it would be a fantastic time to think of a family council or a family board and to start building the skill set and expose them to some of the key decisions that will be made. So they expose them through them learning about the family business. Maybe they were not directly involved up to this point in any of the business interests, but now you can start to educate. People can do education and come back and say, I learned this at some of the seminars I attended. I think we should be considering this. So Kelly, a question then for you. Does succession have to be so complicated?
It's almost a trick question. Succession is complex and it's always going to be complex. But I'm sure, or hopefully as we've highlighted today, you have the ability to choose when you actually want to deal with the complexity. Whether you want to plan years in advance or make those decisions when you are pressured to make those decisions. The more pressure anyone has, the higher their anxiety levels will be, and the more likely they will deal with complexity that they actually have no control over.
Great answer. Thank you, Kelly. I think, if you want more control over a successful outcome, start early, start with the conversations. It doesn't have to be a deep, deep conversation. It may just be, you know what, I'm considering the following. What questions should I be considering as I start to enter into this? So thank you for the questions. So in conclusion, first of all, we want to thank you for your time. We know time is precious and it's the biggest gift that you can give us. And so we want to thank you for attending. On the screen, you see our contact details. If you want to reach out to us, even respond to the email that you will receive in the next few days with a recording of the webinar, please feel free to do so. If you want to reach us through somebody you know at MPhil already, please do so. We'd be happy to take any questions and set up a call with you. No matter where you are across Canada, we're able to do that through Teams and Zoom. We're happy to talk to you. So in terms of next steps, before you focus on what plan works for you, I want a plan, I want a clear plan. Focus on understanding what you actually need. Focus on the things that you need to consider as you go through this. We have designed our whole succession process called Exit Smart and Transition Smart. We've actually built the whole process to deal with these important questions early on. Many times you would have to revisit that and say, this is what we're doing now. Why are we doing it again? Well, you've got something to go back to. You've had the important conversations from the important questions that were asked. So you can look out for some of the follow-up emails and contact details, as I said, in the email, and then you're welcome to schedule a meeting with myself or Kelly. There will be no cost to you, or just reach out to your local MPhil representative through which you may have received an invitation for this call. So we thank you for attending today. We hope that you have a good Wednesday, and especially if you're in BC, that your recovery from all the flooding would be smooth in the next few weeks. It's been a tough time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.